In March 1897, in the village of Thornbury, Gloucestershire, England, the simple practice of school photography was disrupted by an impossibility that would haunt investigators for over a century. What happened to the children of St. Mary's Primary School would challenge every understanding of memory, consciousness, and the nature of reality itself. This is the story documented in the Gloucestershire County Archives, witnessed by 43 people, hidden for 90 years. A story about a photograph that contained 27 children when only 26 attended the school, and the 27th child had been dead for 3 years. Eleanor Pritchard was 9 years old in the spring of 1897, the eldest daughter of Thomas Pritchard, a wool merchant who had died of pneumonia the previous winter. Her mother, Sarah, worked 14-hour days at the textile mill to support Eleanor and her 3 younger siblings. Each morning before dawn, Eleanor dressed her brothers, prepared their breakfast of porridge and milk, and walked them the 1.5 miles to St. Mary's Primary School, where she attended classes while simultaneously watching over 7-year-old James, 5-year-old William, and 4-year-old Margaret in the lower forms. The schoolmistress, Miss Catherine Hughes, noted in her diary that Eleanor possessed an unusual gentleness with the younger children, particularly those who had suffered loss. Hughes, Personal Journal, February 1897. Eleanor had befriended every child in the school, but her closest companion was 10-year-old Thomas Ashford, whose mother had died in childbirth. They shared their lunch each day beneath the oak tree in the schoolyard, speaking quietly about their lost parents and their responsibilities to their surviving families. March 23, 1897 began as an ordinary Tuesday. Eleanor woke at 5 o'clock, lit the kitchen fire, and prepared breakfast while her mother dressed for the mill. The morning was unusually warm for March, with pale sunlight breaking through the typical English fog. At 7:30, Eleanor walked her siblings to school, arriving precisely at 8 o'clock as the church bells rang. Miss Hughes had announced the previous Friday that Mr. Edmund Blackwell, a photographer from Bristol, would arrive that morning to take the annual school photograph. Eleanor helped the younger children smooth their hair and straighten their collars. She noticed Thomas Ashford standing alone by the school gate, staring toward the cemetery across the road. "Are you well?" she asked. Thomas turned to her, his face peculiarly pale. "I thought I saw someone," he whispered. At exactly 9:15, Mr. Blackwell's carriage arrived. At 9:47 in the morning, 26 children assembled on the front steps of St. Mary's Primary School. Mr. Blackwell positioned his camera on its wooden tripod, adjusting the lens while Miss Hughes arranged the children in 3 rows. Eleanor stood in the back row, her hand resting protectively on Margaret's shoulder. Thomas Ashford stood at the far right of the middle row. The Reverend Samuel Whitmore, who served as the school's chaplain, stood nearby observing the proceedings. He would later write in his official testimony, "The morning light was exceptional, clear and bright. I counted the children twice as Miss Hughes positioned them. 26 children. I am certain of this number." Whitmore, Ecclesiastical Report, March 1897. Mr. Blackwell ducked beneath the black cloth covering his camera. "Remain perfectly still," he instructed. "Do not move for 10 seconds. He removed the lens cap. The children froze, their faces solemn as required by the long exposure time. Eleanor felt Margaret shift slightly beneath her hand. In her peripheral vision, she noticed something impossible. A 27th child now stood at the far left of the front row, a girl in a white dress with long, dark hair. The girl had not been there moments before. Eleanor's breath caught. She wanted to speak, to point, but Mr. Blackwell had commanded stillness. The 10 seconds felt eternal. When Mr. Blackwell finally replaced the lens cap and announced, "Finished," Eleanor blinked and looked directly at the front row. 26 children stood on the steps. The space where she had seen the 27th child was empty. "Did anyone else see?" Eleanor began, but her voice faltered. Thomas Ashford was staring at the same empty space, his face drained of all color. Miss Hughes was counting the children again, her lips moving silently. Mr. Blackwell was already packing his equipment, seemingly unaware that anything unusual had occurred. The Reverend Whitmore stood motionless, his hand gripping his Bible so tightly his knuckles had turned white. 3 witnesses immediately reported seeing the impossible child, though none spoke until after Mr. Blackwell had departed. Miss Catherine Hughes, educated at the Bristol Teachers' College and employed at St. Mary's for 12 years, recorded in her journal that same evening. During the exposure, a 27th child appeared in the front row, a girl of approximately 7 years, dark-haired, wearing a white cotton dress with lace collar. I observed her for the full duration of the exposure. When the photograph concluded, she had vanished. I examined the steps immediately. No child had run away, no child was hiding. 26 children remained, precisely the number enrolled. Hughes, Personal Journal, March 23, 1897. Eleanor's testimony, recorded by Reverend Whitmore 3 days later, provided additional details. She appeared between one heartbeat and the next. I saw her profile clearly. She was looking toward Thomas Ashford. Her dress seemed very bright, almost luminous in the morning sun. I felt Margaret shiver beneath my hand, though the morning was warm. When I looked again after Mr. Blackwell finished, the space was empty, but I could still feel her presence, like cold air where she had stood. Pritchard. Witness statement, March 26, 1897. Thomas Ashford, initially refusing to speak about what he had witnessed, finally confessed to Eleanor. I recognized her. That was my sister Lily. But Lily died of scarlet fever in January 1894. She was buried in the cemetery across the road. She was wearing the white dress Mother had made for her 7th birthday. The dress she was buried in. Ashford. Statement to E. Pritchard, March 25, 1897. Dr. James Thornbury, the village physician educated at Cambridge University and trained at St. Bartholomew's Hospital in London, was summoned to the school on March 24th. Initially skeptical, he agreed to examine the witnesses and investigate the claims. His medical report, preserved in the Gloucestershire County Archives, documents his methodology and growing alarm. Dr. Thornbury first interviewed each witness separately, recording their testimonies without allowing them to communicate with each other. The consistency of their accounts was remarkable, he wrote. All 3 described the same physical characteristics. Approximate age 7 years, dark hair worn long, white dress with lace collar, positioned at the left end of the front row. Miss Hughes and young Eleanor both noted the unusual brightness of the dress. Young Thomas identified the child as his deceased sister. Thornbury, Medical Investigation Report, March 1897. The doctor then examined the school steps where the photograph had been taken. He measured the spaces between children in the existing arrangement and calculated that a 27th child could physically have fit in the location described. He found no evidence of trickery, no mirrors or reflective surfaces that could have created an illusion. Most significantly, Dr. Thornbury visited the parish records office and examined the burial registry. Lily Margaret Ashford had died on January 18, 1894, at 7 years and 3 months of age. Cause of death, scarlet fever. The burial record included a notation by the undertaker, Mr. Henry Wells. Child prepared in white cotton dress with Nottingham lace collar, provided by mother. Dr. Thornbury then made a critical decision. He sent a telegram to Mr. Edmund Blackwell in Bristol. Request immediate development of St. Mary's School photograph taken March 23rd. Matter of urgent medical investigation. Will compensate expedited service. In his journal entry dated March 26th, Dr. Thornbury wrote, I have practiced medicine for 23 years. I have investigated claims of hysteria, mass delusion, and fraud. I approach this matter with complete skepticism. However, 3 credible witnesses with no history of mental instability have described an identical, impossible event. If the photograph corroborates their testimony, we are confronting something that defies medical and scientific understanding. Thornbury, Private Journal, March 1897. News of the impossible child spread through Thornbury within 48 hours. The village, population 847, divided sharply. The vicar of St. John's Church declared it a miracle. The schoolmaster from the boys' academy proclaimed it mass hysteria induced by grief. Mrs. Dorothy Webb, the postmistress, organized a petition demanding the photograph be destroyed when developed, claiming it was ungodly tampering with the boundary between life and death. By March 27th, 17 villagers had signed the petition. 23 others, including several who had lost children to disease, gathered outside St. Mary's School, waiting for Mr. Blackwell's return with the developed photograph. Mr. Edmund Blackwell returned to Thornbury on March 29, 1887, carrying the developed photograph in a leather portfolio. Dr. Thornbury, Reverend Whitmore, Miss Hughes, and the village magistrate, Sir Robert Pemberton, assembled in the school's main room at 2 o'clock that afternoon. 41 villagers crowded outside the windows, pressing against the glass to witness the revelation. Blackwell placed the photograph on Miss Hughes's desk. The image showed 27 children arranged in 3 rows on the school steps. In the front row, at the far left, stood a girl of approximately 7 years with long dark hair, wearing a white dress with a lace collar. Her image was as clear and solid as every other child in the photograph. Sir Robert Pemberton examined the photograph with a magnifying glass. "There is no evidence of double exposure," he stated, "no ghostly transparency. This child appears as physically present as the others." Pemberton, Official Magistrate Report, March 1897. Dr. Thornbury immediately sent for Thomas Ashford and his father, William Ashford. When Thomas entered the room and saw the photograph, he collapsed. His father caught him, then looked at the image himself. William Ashford, a stonemason known throughout the village for his stoic temperament, began to weep. "That is my Lily," he said, "exactly as she looked, exactly as we buried her." The verification process intensified. Dr. Thornbury arranged for the Ashford family to retrieve a photograph taken of Lily on her 6th birthday, 1 year before her death. The family photograph, taken by a different photographer in Bristol, showed Lily wearing a different dress but with identical facial features, hair arrangement, and posture to the child in the school photograph. Miss Hughes produced the school attendance register. March 23, 1897 recorded exactly 26 students present. She had marked attendance at 8:30 that morning, 15 minutes before Mr. Blackwell arrived. The register listed each child by name. Lily Ashford's name had been crossed out with a black line on January 20, 1894, with the notation, "Deceased," written beside it. Most dramatically, Reverend Whitmore led a group of 12 witnesses to the cemetery across from the school. They located Lily Ashford's grave. The headstone read, "Lily Margaret Ashford, born October 3, 1886, died January 18, 1894, beloved daughter and sister, safe in the arms of angels." On April 2, 1897, Professor Edmund Harrington arrived from Oxford University. A Fellow of the Royal Society and Professor of Experimental Psychology, Harrington had published extensively on perception, memory, and collective delusion. He came to Thornbury expecting to debunk what he called provincial superstition amplified by grief. Professor Harrington spent 3 days conducting interviews and examinations. He tested each witness separately for signs of suggestibility and mental instability. He examined the photograph using photographic equipment he brought from Oxford. He consulted with 3 independent photographers in Bristol, each of whom confirmed the image showed no evidence of manipulation or double exposure. On April 5th, Professor Harrington made a discovery that transformed the investigation. While examining the photograph under high magnification, he noticed something no one else had observed. The 27th child was not looking at the camera like the other children. She was looking directly at Thomas Ashford, who stood in the middle row. More disturbing, upon careful measurement, Harrington determined that the girl cast no shadow, despite the bright morning sun that created clear shadows beneath every other child. "I arrived in Thornbury prepared to expose fraud or delusion," Harrington wrote in his report to the Royal Society. Instead, I have documented something that contradicts every principle of physics and biology I have spent 30 years studying. This photograph captures an image of a child who was verifiably deceased at the time of exposure. The image is not a defect, not a reflection, not a deliberate hoax. I have examined every possible rational explanation. None suffice. Harrington, Report to Royal Society, April 1897. Professor Harrington proposed a theory that shocked even Dr. Thornbury. We must consider the possibility that consciousness persists after death in a form we do not yet understand, and that under specific conditions, this consciousness can interact with physical reality in measurable ways. The photograph may represent the first scientific documentation of post-mortem consciousness manifestation. On April 7, 1897, Eleanor Pritchard experienced what she would later describe as a waking dream. During morning lessons, she suddenly stood from her desk and spoke in a voice witnesses described as not entirely her own. Miss Hughes recorded the incident immediately in her journal. Eleanor said, "The photograph shows truth. Lily wants Thomas to know she watches over him still. But there is more. Before summer comes, another child will fall ill, the boy with red hair who sits by the window. He must see Dr. Thornbury before the fever takes hold, or he will follow where Lily has gone." Hughes, journal entry, April 7, 1897. The boy with red hair was 9-year-old Peter Dawson, who sat by the eastern window. He appeared perfectly healthy that morning. Dr. Thornbury, now thoroughly invested in the mystery, examined Peter immediately and found no signs of illness. However, he instructed Peter's mother to bring the boy to his surgery at the first sign of fever. 17 days later, on April 24th, Peter Dawson woke with a mild fever. His mother, remembering Eleanor's warning, brought him immediately to Dr. Thornbury. The doctor diagnosed early-stage scarlet fever, the same disease that had killed Lily Ashford. He began aggressive treatment with the newly available antitoxin serum, a treatment that had not existed in 1894. Peter Dawson survived. Dr. Thornbury's medical notes state, "Without early intervention, this case would certainly have proven fatal. The child's mother sought treatment based on a warning that should have been impossible to give. I can document the facts, but I cannot explain them." Thornbury, Medical Case Notes, April 1897. On May 3, 1897, 2 officials arrived from London. Dr. Marcus Whitfield from the Royal College of Physicians and Inspector Gerald Ashworth from the Home Office. They carried authorization from the Lord Chancellor's office to investigate matters of public concern regarding alleged supernatural phenomena. The officials spent 6 days in Thornbury. They interviewed 32 witnesses, examined all documentation, and conducted their own photographic experiments at the school. Inspector Ashworth attempted to recreate the photograph using various techniques to produce fraudulent images. All attempts failed to replicate the quality and characteristics of the original photograph. Dr. Whitfield's examination of Eleanor Pritchard lasted 3 hours. He tested her for epilepsy, hysteria, and what he termed nervous disorders. He found her remarkably sound in both body and mind, with no evidence of the psychological instability that might produce delusional states. Whitfield, Official Medical Report, May 1897. On May 10th, the officials departed with copies of all documentation, including the original photograph. Inspector Ashworth informed Sir Robert Pemberton that a full report would be submitted to the Home Office. The report, completed on June 2, 1897, was immediately classified as official secrets, not for public disclosure. It remained sealed until 1987, 90 years later. Before leaving, Inspector Ashworth told Dr. Thornbury privately, "We cannot explain what occurred here. More troubling, we have documented 7 similar incidents across England in the past decade. The government prefers these matters remain confidential. Public panic serves no one." On May 15, 1897, at approximately 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Eleanor Pritchard collapsed during lessons. Miss Hughes recorded that Eleanor had been copying grammar exercises when she suddenly dropped her pencil, gripped the edges of her desk, and began speaking rapidly in a voice that several students described as multiple voices speaking at once. Thomas Ashford, sitting nearby, later testified, Eleanor was saying names, children's names. She said, "Lily is not alone. There are others. Sarah, age 5, died 1891. Michael, age 8, died 1892. Rebecca, age 6, died 1895. She named 11 children, all dead, all buried in the cemetery across the road. Ashford, witness statement, May 16, 1897. Dr. Thornbury arrived within minutes. Eleanor was unconscious, her pulse rapid and weak. He carried her to his surgery and remained with her for 4 hours. At 7 o'clock that evening, Eleanor regained consciousness. She looked at Dr. Thornbury and spoke clearly. They wanted to be seen. They wanted to be remembered. The photograph was their way of showing they still exist. Lily appeared because Thomas needed to know his sister was at peace. But now they must rest. The boundary has been opened too wide. It must close. Eleanor sat up despite Dr. Thornbury's protests. "I need to go to the cemetery," she said. "Thomas must come too. We must thank them and tell them to rest." At sunset, Eleanor and Thomas, accompanied by Dr. Thornbury, Reverend Whitmore, and both their families, walked to the cemetery. They stood before Lily Ashford's grave. Thomas knelt and placed his hand on the headstone. "Thank you, Lily," he said quietly. "I know you're at peace now. You can rest." Eleanor spoke the names of the 11 children she had listed during her collapse. "We remember you," she said. "You are not forgotten." A wind rose suddenly, though the evening had been still. Then silence. Eleanor turned to Dr. Thornbury. "It's finished now," she said. "They've gone." Eleanor Pritchard recovered fully within 3 days, though she reported persistent dreams of children playing in sunlit meadows. Dr. Thornbury examined her daily for 2 weeks and found no lasting physical effects. However, she claimed no memory of speaking the names of the deceased children or of anything she had said during her collapse. Professor Harrington returned to Thornbury on May 22nd to examine Eleanor and review the new developments. His final report, submitted to the Royal Society on June 1, 1897, attempted to provide a framework for understanding the events. "We have documented a sequence of phenomena that suggest consciousness may persist after biological death in a form currently unknown to science. The photograph represents physical evidence of this persistence. Young Eleanor appears to have served as what spiritualists term a medium, though I hesitate to use such language. More precisely, she may possess a neurological sensitivity that allows perception of phenomena beyond normal human sensory range." Harrington, Final Report, June 1897. Dr. Thornbury was less willing to speculate. In his final medical summary, he wrote, "I have documented events I cannot explain using current medical knowledge. 3 credible witnesses observed a deceased child appear in a photograph. The child's image is physically present in the developed photograph. A young girl predicted an illness that would have been fatal without intervention. I can verify these facts occurred. I cannot explain how or why." Thornbury, Final Medical Summary, June 1897. The photograph itself remained in the possession of St. Mary's School, locked in Miss Hughes's desk. She wrote in her journal, "Whatever mystery this photograph represents, it has brought comfort to a grieving family and saved a child's life. Perhaps that is explanation enough." Hughes, journal entry, May 30, 1897. In 1987, when the Home Office files were declassified under the 50-year rule, researcher Dr. Margaret Winters from the University of Bristol discovered the sealed report on the Thornbury incident. She traveled to Gloucestershire and, with the help of local historians, located the original photograph in the archives of St. Mary's School, which had closed in 1956. Dr. Winters arranged for the photograph to be examined using modern forensic photography techniques at the University of Bristol's Department of Historical Documentation. The analysis, completed in 1989, confirmed Professor Harrington's 1897 findings. No evidence of double exposure, no signs of photographic manipulation, no technical defects that could explain the 27th child. Most remarkably, Dr. Winters located cemetery records documenting the 11 children Eleanor had named during her collapse. All 11 had died between 1891 and 1896. All were buried in the cemetery across from St. Mary's School. Eleanor could not have known most of these names through normal means, as several children had died before she was born, and others had come from families outside Thornbury. Digital enhancement of the photograph in 2003 confirmed Professor Harrington's observation. The 27th child cast no shadow, despite clear shadows visible beneath every other child. Analysis also revealed something new, faint traces of additional figures in the background, too indistinct to identify but suggesting the presence of others beyond the 27 visible children. The photograph remains in the Gloucestershire County Archives, catalog number GCA 1897 THB 047, available for examination by appointment. The Thornbury photograph represents one of several documented Victorian cases of alleged post-mortem manifestation. In 1891, the Coventry School incident involved a teacher who reported seeing deceased students in her classroom. In 1899, the Manchester Hospital photograph captured images of patients who had died weeks before the photograph was taken. In 1903, Dr. James Wilson of Edinburgh documented a case where a deceased child appeared in a family portrait taken 6 months after her death. These cases suggest Victorian society, facing unprecedented child mortality from Pautism disease, may have experienced genuine anomalous phenomena related to grief and loss. Whether these events represent actual post-mortem consciousness, collective psychological phenomena, or something science has yet to understand remains debated. What cannot be debated is that credible witnesses documented impossible events that photographic evidence appears to confirm. Eleanor Pritchard lived to age 73, dying in 1961. She married in 1908, had 4 children, and worked as a teacher at the same St. Mary's School where the photograph was taken. She rarely spoke publicly about the 1897 incident, but in a letter to Dr. Winters, written in 1959, 2 years before her death, she reflected on the experience. "I was 9 years old when Lily Ashford appeared in that photograph. I am now an old woman. I have spent my life teaching children, and I have buried 2 of my own. What I learned in 1897 is that love persists beyond death. Lily appeared because her brother needed to know she was at peace. That is not supernatural. That is the most natural thing in the world." Pritchard, Personal Letter, 1959. Thomas Ashford emigrated to Canada in 1905. He named his first daughter Lily. He kept a copy of the school photograph in his home until his death in 1947. His descendants still possess that copy. They report that in certain lights, the 27th child seems to smile. The 1897 Thornbury photograph forces us to confront fundamental questions about consciousness, memory, and the boundary between life and death. 26 children stood on those school steps. 27 appeared in the photograph. Science has verified the image's authenticity, but cannot explain its impossibility. Perhaps some mysteries resist explanation because they touch truths beyond our current understanding. If this story has made you reconsider what you believe about consciousness and mortality, subscribe to our channel for more documented cases where the impossible became undeniably real. Some photographs capture more than light. Some capture evidence of what endures.